Hello, beautiful community. Let's say a tiny bit analytically about the attack on the Crimean Bridge. But before, it's the 9th anniversary of MH17 today. And I think one of the important takeaways is how slow democratic citizens are to wake up to the reality that a hybrid war is a real war until it becomes a real war. The attack on the bridge. Now, militarily, we're not going to make any comments, but this obviously looks like a much more repeatable act, so we could expect more compared with the enormously elaborate process that generated the last major attack. No grain deal. Mr. Putin pulling out of the grain deal, and Ukraine is free to attack the bridge. Z radicals hate the grain deal, but that does not mean that we should begin to think that this is a false flag operation. There is no reason whatever to think that. The consequences of Mr. Putin pulling out of the grain deal, and this is not my expertise, are consequences that Ukraine may be diplomatically better placed to deal with than the last time in terms of its links with various African countries. Now, a lot of you have asked me to comment on Russian tourism in Crimea, like why are there 1,000 cars, which is not that much, waiting to get into Crimea the day before? Statistics for Russian tourism are going, south with Crimea, but people are going. You could understand some sort of Z radicals going, but what about the rest of them? How does that work? Because you're going to a war zone adjacent occupied territory while a war is going on. And I think that a thought that's very important here, and I can't break it down into a pie chart for you, is just not my expertise, the nature of recent Russian tourism in Crimea. But an important thought is that denial in evasion can take on a hysterical form too, right? I can make my dinner as my roof is falling through, and I can be more pedantic about the way I make my dinner precisely because my roof is falling through. So the depoliticization of the Russian population naturally goes with a normalizing psychology that when it gets harder to keep things looking normal, people try all the more to make them look normal to themselves. So if we create a bizarre, impossible scenario of Mr. Putin waking up tomorrow and saying that Crimea is Ukrainian and that Mr. Zelensky can have it immediately, but in exchange for the next 5 years he has to allow in the month of July visa-free entry for Russian tourists, would some kind of want to go? Yeah. I mean, these guys, they might feel had a kind of a war. I mean, the Putin guys, the Zelensky guy had a war, and there were all kinds of military problems that arose from that. But as long as my trip isn't going to be affected by military problems, I mean, whether this stuff is Ukrainian, Russian, whether it's NATO-owned, who cares? If I go there and nothing's going to fall on my head, the guys in charge can sort out what's what and whose is whose, what's whose, so long as I can just proceed with my own activities. So that is the nature of the depoliticized mindset, right? It's a mindset without a political position, and it's a mindset with considerable potential for hysteria. And I don't want to use that word too much. It has very many justly pointed out negative connotations. But let me just do it on this occasion. It goes with a kind of hysterical avoidance about taking a position, right? The military, the special military operation is proceeding, right? Will I be affected? Right? That's the logic. Eventually, right, that hysterical resistance to politicization snaps, but more things like the Mr. Prigozhin mutiny need to happen for that. Lots of love for the moment. Talk very soon.